I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
A Friday edition here, a Feedback Friday edition of Flagrant Howls. Phil Mackey with the sports dad, Judd Zulgad. And we are less than a week away from the NBA draft. We are 9 days away from NBA free agents agreeing to terms on contracts. Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of trades likely sprinkled in and around. We also have the Olympics coming up in at the end of July, right? And then Summer League is sandwiched in there too. So it's kind of a fun time to be following the association here. Before we dive into Feedback Friday, let's say hello to Ecofun here. In fact, we're going to show you on the YouTube channel this ridiculous warehouse full of goodies. Ecofun is your summertime fun headquarters with locations in Forest Lake and in Burnsville. The Forest Lake location also has watercraft, 2024 Kawasaki and Yamaha. For the pavement, we're talking scooters, ATVs, motorcycles, side-by-sides, electric bikes. Your summertime fun headquarters. Stop into either of those locations, Ecofun in Forest Lake or Burnsville, ecofunmotorsports.com. So, okay, here's the first question from Where's Waldo 05 on the Score North YouTube channel.
Fair enough.
When you hear crickets, that's when moves get made. There were absolute crickets before Rudy Gobert 2 years ago. Unlike, let's see here, until like the day before. Yeah, like there was pretty much nothing.
It's a windy steam. Point of the fingers.
Now, why is that?
That's what that was about.
The Utah Jazz.
You just didn't mention the Timberwolves.
Yep. When I see rumors floating, that's when I know nothing's going to happen. And games are being played through the media for whatever motivations teams may have been stating such rumors for.
Very stupid.
But it's that calm and that quiet where actual news comes out. Mm-hmm. Do you think do you think it's quiet because the Wolves are going to pull something massive, or do you think it's quiet because it's just going to be kind of quiet?
Well, I think it depends. I think this is a very astute observation by Where's Waldo 689 25 34 hike. But I also think what that person is saying depends on the time of the year as well. So after the season in the playoffs, and the playoffs, obviously the finals are now just done. I think sometimes it's just quiet because it's quiet. But like once free agency starts, sometimes, and there's trades being bandied about, the teams that go underground, the teams that go quiet, sometimes are working on things. Right now, do I think the Timberwolves are orchestrating a deal that's going to pop soon here? I don't get that impression. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there are times where that observation is right on the money. Don't you?
Now, yeah, I do agree. Like it's pretty rare. I mean, how many times have we heard cat rumors the last 2 or 3 years, right? And buzz and articles and whatever. And we've talked on these podcasts.
Yep. And
it's just a bunch of discussion. But the Rudy Gobert thing, I think it kind of illustrated, and also the D'Lo stuff. We knew that there was a possibility that D'Lo was going to get traded. But like the D'Lo for Conley thing kind of came out of left field. It felt like, I guess they're going to keep going forward with D'Lo. It shines a light on how Tim Connelly prefers to operate. I think he likes to operate in the shadows. Yep. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that loves the media. He certainly doesn't love the media spotlight. He barely does interviews. You'll see, you'll see him around at Target Center and stuff, but he's not like craving the spotlight. I don't think he's spending hours a week on the phone on background with the Shams and the Wojs, and he doesn't seem like the guy that's pulling a bunch of strings with the media behind the scenes. I think if he's going to make a move, it's going to be a very close-knit group of people that are aware that he's thinking said move. Mm-hmm. So, but does it because it's quiet, because it's crickets, does that mean that they're on the verge of something big? I would still tend to lean toward they're probably going to run it back with their main players with some little tweaks. Maybe this is the interesting thing, and we'll get to a couple other feedback items in regards to this, but are the Wolves appealing enough as one of the 4 remaining teams in last year's playoffs, and Anthony Edwards being this rising superstar? are they appealing enough now for the veteran minimum guys, the guys that are looking to latch on and either prove something or latch on and win a championship? That might be, an area of player acquisition that they can tap into that they really haven't much in previous years or decades.
Right. But I think the note that you read is more appealing to is there a cat trade about to go down or something? And I don't get that sense. And I don't know the timing would be right now. That doesn't mean the timing won't be right at some point in time. Good observation. I don't feel like we're going down that path currently.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, another team that is improving itself in the last 12, 18 hours as we record this on a Friday morning, multiple people have sent us notes asking about Oklahoma City trading Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. So Oklahoma City makes this playoff run. They're the number 1 seed in the Western Conference with pretty much everybody in their rotation 25 years old or younger.
Yep.
And so they take, I believe Giddey's 21 now, so 21-year-old Josh Giddey, a very tumultuous year for him.
It was a trying year. Much of it brought on by himself.
Yeah. Every time he touched the ball at Target Center, I feel like for 2.5 hours, Timberwolves fans were on his case, and it was like that in many areas. So they say goodbye to Josh Giddey, and they bring in Alex Caruso, grizzled veteran, not super veteran, but 30-year-old perimeter defender. He's a three-point shooter.
You know what you're getting.
Yep. You're getting
him.
An adult, a defender, a guy that's an organizer, a guy that can handle the ball, who can shoot some threes.
Yep.
So the Thunder, who are already very scary as this incredible, talented young team, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as one of the best players in the NBA, they swap out one of their young pieces for an adult in the room. I think the Thunder got a level better with this trade last night, even though Caruso isn't going to be the centerpiece of their team.
Yep.
This is a great little counterpunch to the Western Conference, and so the Thunder got better. We listed some ways earlier this week that the Wolves can get better even if they don't make a move, but that is something to keep an eye on, what the Thunder just did last night.
I wonder too, and this is not an apples to apples player comp on court at all, okay? But hear me out. I wonder if the Thunder saw the Wolves too, and Mike Conley. And again, to your point, an adult in the room who can organize on the court and off the court, right?
Yeah.
And, I think it's safe to say this without going down the path of what exactly Josh Giddey did or did not do. Probably not the most mature guy. In fact, I'm not sure that Chicago's the best market for the young man, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But I don't know, if you saw what the Wolves did and what Conley did for the team, I'm not talking statistically, I'm just talking for the team. And then you looked at your own roster and you're like, you know what? That was a pretty smart move by Conley and the boys. I wonder if that's part of this, because that maturity helps you so much. And it's not even like a guy that's got to tell guys exactly what to do, but if they see that, right, the maturity. I'm like Mike Conley, I think a bunch of what he does just rubs off. You can't help but see how he handles himself, how he keeps himself in shape, how he is hurting probably a lot of the time, but yet he plays all the time.
Yeah.
So,
and Caruso has a championship. It was the weird bubble year in 2020, but he was on that Lakers team playing 25, 30 minutes and playing defense. And so he comes in. He's also another body if you're looking at the Wolves matchup. He's 6'6". He's another guy you can throw at Anthony Edwards to try and disrupt what Ant's doing on offense.
Sure.
So yeah, that's a really interesting move by the Thunder. So you mentioned the Bulls. We're not really sure what the Bulls have been doing the last few years, much of the last 25 years.
Yes.
And this came across, and some people sent it to us here. So Lonzo Ball's tenure with the Bulls is likely nearing an end, according to Darnell Mayberry. Josh Giddey's acquisition further clouds the Bulls' plan for recovering point guard Lonzo Ball, who hasn't played since January of 2022, but is expected to make a comeback next season. It's impossible not to view Giddey as insurance in case Ball doesn't return. By bringing in Giddey, the Bulls also might have signaled they're ready to move on from Lonzo Ball. A trade or a buyout could be likely. Mm-hmm. So Lonzo Ball has had multiple knee surgeries that have kept him out for like 2 years.
Yeah.
It's been a slow recovery, but some people are saying, could there be like a Sean Livingston act 2 to his career where you're derailed by knee injuries in your 20s, but then you become this really important role player, the Warriors, Clippers for Sean Livingston.
Right.
So Lonzo Ball, all the pomp and all the hype when he comes in, his dad, big baller brand. I mean, it was obnoxious 8 years ago, 7 years ago. But all of that's kind of settled. If he can come back even like 80% of the player that he was, he's only 26 years old. He's gone from being this janky shooter. He still has a weird shooting motion, but he's now a 40% three-point shooter later in his career here. 6'6". He's a big point guard, great passer. He rebounds really well for a guard. If you're looking for creative ways, if you can't go and spend a bunch of money on a point guard because of your cap situation, or you're not going to get an immediate, with the 27th pick, an immediate guy that you're going to slide in.
Sure.
If you could get Lonzo Ball on the buyout market for something close to league minimum, veterans minimum on a make good year, that's interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if the contract's that cheap, potentially, then yes. It's worth, at that point, it's probably worth a look-see, and I don't know where he would want to try to sign, or the amount of teams that would actually pursue him. But I would think that it has to be something akin to a make-good contract, right? Because, I mean, those knee problems, we've seen this before. It's very rarely that they end really, really well. So, yes, if you could get him for the right price at that age, I would certainly take a look. I also would think that the team would not expect much.
Yeah, I mean, I would take a flyer. Like, I don't know what other plans they have cooking, but I'd be interested. I just pulled up Sean Livingston too. A little bit of a different circumstance because he was like 21 years old when the knee injuries hit, but Livingston comes in with the Clippers, and he's this really promising young player. I believe he came in when he was 19 years old, 4th overall pick.
Yep.
And he comes in, plays 3 years, misses all of 2007, 2008, misses pretty much all of 2008, 2009, and then a huge chunk of 2009, 2010. But then he settles in his mid-20s. So he basically comes back with Charlotte in 2010-11 on a make good. And he, like, toward the end of his career, from age 29 all the way through 33, 34, he was a huge part of those Warriors teams early in Steph Curry's career, Klay Thompson's career. A guy that could get you some buckets and play some defense. I don't know. So that's a comp that people have been throwing out.
It could be it could be a little bit like Brandon Roy too, though, right?
Could be. Where
I mean, that was just a lost cause by the end, which was a shame because when healthy, that guy was a really good player.
Yeah.
But.
Remember, like, I think Kevin McHale went on the record around draft time that he loved Brandon Roy because McHale made the Foy pick, right? He was.
Oh, well, they swap. Did they swap them for each other?
That sounds about right. But the Wolves loved Roy, but they saw like a 5-year limit on his knees, maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, he was a ticking time bomb.
So they drafted however it worked out. They wound up with Randy Foy instead.
Yep.
And that was at the end of the KG era. And I guess the what if scenario there was, well, what if you would have had the first 2 or 3 years of Brandon Roy, who was awesome in Portland?
Yes. With
KG still in Minnesota, would that have turned out differently for KG, or does he still wind up getting traded and going to Boston? I don't know. And Brandon Roy's knees were still a ticking time.
Roy was originally picked 6th overall. And it looks like it was by the Wolves.
I think you're right on that.
And
I
then
think
he
you're
went
right.
to Portland.
Yeah.
But I mean, unfortunately for when he finally got back here and tried to play, I just remember his knees were always wrapped up, and it was
really bad.
It was sad.
It was bad. Okay, Tyrell Adams emails the show here.
Reckless speculation.
We'll take your trade ideas just for fun here. So he has a Cat trade idea. Again, I think we don't feel like Cat's going to get traded, but we'll entertain the premise here. So Tyrell Adams says, how about Cat to the Magic and the Wolves get Jalen Suggs and maybe, whatever else you would need to to make it work. The salaries do not match at all on that, so there'd have to be some other pieces. So I've seen the Jalen Suggs thing floated around for the last couple of years. It is an interesting concept. So he's one of us, Jalen Suggs, Minnesota, right? He's one of the most improved guards in the NBA the last 3 years. He went from his rookie year, he shot like 35 or 36% from the field, not from three, from the field.
I remember that. Yeah.
And he was under 30% from three. It was really bad. And he has become much more efficient offensively. He's become, I think he shot 40% from 3-point range or close to it this last year. You know, he's a pretty big guard too. And he makes about $9 million now. He's up for an extension. It kind of feels to me like the Magic already have the 7-foot unicorn thing with Banchero and a couple of Wagners, and like so I don't know that it would be a direct trade with the Magic, or if you'd have to send Cat to a different team and be like a 3-team trade. But I will say this, like if the Magic wanted to move off Suggs, or if they didn't feel like they wanted to pay him, and Tim Connelly said, oh yeah, slow start to his career, but we really like this guy. We think he can be kind of a combo guard. It's an interesting name, Jalen Suggs.
There's two things that occur to me off of that. One is, and we're not going to know this unless the Cat trade goes down, and I agree with you. I think for the most part it won't, at least this offseason. But my first question is this. What does Tim Connelly consider a suitable Cat trade? Like, does Connelly think he has to win it clearly? Does Connelly... if Glenn and or Alex or Mark say you got to get below the second apron, do you take a trade that, you're like, okay, it's not a bad trade, but it's certainly not like a huge win for us. And so that's my first question is, what does Conley consider a true win or a suitable trade? That's the most important thing. My second question about this entire thing too is, if you go down this path, to tie it back to my first point, is it because you think you're improving the team for sure, or is it because there is a mandate that you have to trim payroll?
Yes, and
salary,
and to your question too about like what would, with all of the, like, we don't know where they're at with second apron, and I think, as long as Glenn's going to continue to own the team through free agency, and it sounds like everything I'm hearing is he's going to pay whatever the luxury tax needs to be if they want to keep the team together. But from a basketball perspective,
right, to
your point, would a Cat trade involve getting draft capital back and some contracts to match, like some peripheral pieces? I don't know if I love that. Or I saw Jake Painting on Twitter, Howls and Growls. He just floated this question like last night just for fun. Cat for Paul George. Would that make the Timberwolves better?
That's
so Paul George he can be a free agent, but you could do like a sign and trade, which happens all the time in the NBA.
Right.
And maybe there's a third team involved, but would it be that type of deal that would get you to say, scoot up in your chair and say, oh, okay, so it'd be Cat for a different superstar.
Right.
Or we've talked about DeJounte Murray, for instance. Or would it be Cat for a couple peripheral pieces and draft capital? I'm right now with Anthony Edwards, 23, Jade McDaniels, Naz Reid. I don't need a ton more draft picks unless I'm using those draft picks to facilitate a trade, in which case just make it a 3-team trade and give the other team the draft picks.
And I think why the overall national public perception on the Gobert trade was, oh my God, the Jazz got so much, was because the Jazz were going into a rebuild, basically, right?
Correct.
Like the Wolves aren't in that place. So like if the Wolves, if the Cat trade, or if the Gobert trade became the Cat trade, okay? So Tim Connelly goes out and gets 5 first-round picks and blah. That's not where you are at. You need to get immediate help and or make a trade that's going to complement Ant. So like, I think the Wolves would be looked at sideways if they came back with, hey, we got 3 journeymen, or 3 decent players, not great players, and 5 picks. I think you'd be like, hold on a second here. That would have been great circa 2014.
Yeah, I'm out. And it's funny because, like, again, you have a first-round pick this year, and then you have another one in 2026. Like, you've got some picks you can sprinkle in here or trade on draft. You can trade your Doogie confirmed. We asked him the question.
Yeah.
you can trade this year's pick on draft night if you want to. You just can't trade future picks and leave yourself without a pick in consecutive years.
And how impactful, if you've got a top, ordinarily, let's say you have a top 3 to 5 pick, I get that can be, as we saw with Ant in that draft, super advantageous. But how impactful is the overall first round of the draft as well? I mean, it's no guarantee in any sport.
And this year's draft is considered
right.
There's not a lot of guys coming out that are going to change your franchise. It sounds like.
Right. And I know that Europe now plays a huge role as well because college is so fragmented and different. But I guess it feels like in football, right? Like if you get 5 first-round picks, it's holy bleep. You got 5 first-round picks. I mean, it basically does not happen. In basketball, I don't know. I mean, it depends on where the pick's going to be. Like the Timberwolves, these Jazz picks, and I'm sure that when Conley made the Gobert trade, this was the goal, right? These Jazz picks, ideally, ain't going to be great picks.
Mm-hmm.
So are they impactful picks? Are they impactful players?
Yeah.
You know, it's a different animal.
Yep. Yeah, I would love to see, if I'm Connelly, I would say to my amazing staff, hey, okay, convince me, and I'll do the work too, because, you know, I'm a grinder. I'm Tim Connelly. Convince me that trading Cat makes us better. What would that have to look like? Is it Cat for DeJounte Murray? Is it Cat for Paul George? Is it Cat for, something else we're not thinking about?
Right.
Okay, one more for you here. This is trigger warning. Morgan Haas and a couple other people sent us this snippet from Dell Curry, Steph Curry's dad.
Oh, I love this.
From a podcast talking about the 2009 infamous draft where the Wolves took 2 point guards and none of them were Steph Curry. So trigger warning here. Mm-hmm. Dell Curry said, so draft day, we're in New York and I get a call from Don Nelson. He says, Dell, you got a problem if we select Steph number 7? This is Warriors, by the way.
Yes.
Yes, I do, he says. He didn't want the Warriors because they were kind of, And Don's like, what? I'm like, yeah, we want him in New York, Dell said, on the Heat Check with Steph and Dell Curry. So it's like their own podcast.
Yep.
I also got a call from Minnesota asking about drafting Steph. I told them, please don't. Please don't. It was JB Bickerstaff that made the call for the Wolves. And the Wolves said, okay, we won't. But the Warriors blew through the stop sign and said, no, we're going to take Steph Curry.
Yep.
It's 15 years later at this point. It's we're picking at scabs here, but the fact that Dell told the Wolves, don't draft my son, and told the Warriors, don't draft my son, and one franchise yielded to the stop sign and the other one blew through it.
Of course we won't. Well, how much does this change your entire revisionist history opinion? Because we'd always been told that the Curry camp, right, Dell and Steph and the agents had told the Wolves, don't draft him. And it was almost like a threat of, if you do, you'll be sorry. But now we find out that the team that did draft him, and by the way, benefited mightily from it with multiple championships, was also told the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, this drives me crazy. It's incredibly triggering because I always thought the story was, oh, you're the Timberwolves, do not draft him. But hey, if the Warriors do, that's great. That's fine, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now we find out he was targeting the Knicks. I don't blame him at the time. Again, it probably seemed like a great idea. And, Donnie Nelson, who was a great coach in his prime, is like, screw that. I'm drafting him. Yeah, this is very triggering for me. Very triggering because it changes the narrative. I thought the narrative was Minnesota, no. It was basically telling everyone and their brother and sister no because they were trying to go to the Knicks. Changes everything for me.
Yes. Yeah, I think franchise self-esteem is a real thing. And when did I guess the Lacob came in after that draft. So I'm trying to remember who the owner of the Warriors was before the 2009 draft. But I think it's safe to say that the Timberwolves in 2009, coming off just some garbage years there, right? The Kurt Rambis, Randy Whitman. You watch Kevin Garnett win a championship in Boston. The Timberwolves franchise self-esteem was at a low point in 2009. David Kahn is kind of your fake general manager that really didn't know what he was doing. And like a franchise with more history or confidence or bravado would have laughed at that notion and said, sorry, Dell, you don't get to tell us what we do.
Correct.
We are the Lakers. We are the whoever, right? The Celtics.
Right.
And, the Timberwolves just, they weren't in a place franchise self-esteem wise in 2009 to blow past that stop sign.
But it frustrates me more now, and I'm sorry to go back, but it frustrates me more because, the draft exists for this purpose. And look at all of the crappy teams in sports history that have taken potential superstars and built, there was probably a time when the San Antonio Spurs were laughed at. In fact, I know there was. And then, you know what they said? We're taking David Robinson. And then that led into Tim Duncan after a bad year, which was a genius tank. This is why this system exists. And at the very least, in retrospect, especially knowing this now, if you're the Timberwolves, you got to take Steph and tell Dell, you know what, we'll take our chances.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, at this point, it was really triggering for a long time to just kind of watch the Wolves.
Right.
Now that you got Anthony Edwards, it now at least feels like, okay, well,
Right.
Finally sort of found, we don't know if he's going to wind up being what Steph Curry has been to the Warriors, but it does at least feel like they found. But man, all those years where you're trying to figure out who's the superstar, is it Wiggins? Is it Cat? Who is this? And to watch that happen.
Well,
but have some more franchise self-esteem and confidence.
You know what? I'm going to give some credit here, though. I feel like that really began to change back. And I guess I'm giving credit and also lamenting that he was fired the first time. I feel like it changed with Flip coming back. Flip God rest his soul, in the short time that he was back here, he had that swagger. Like he really did. He walked back in that door. Down to the fact that, he basically said, we are going to suck for one more year for sure, and made sure that they did. And no matter what we think of Cat now, that was a really good draft pick, and he had a plan. And, it's such a shame he passed, because when you look at what he had on track there, he had some really good things. He had Garnett back. Like the swagger was coming back. And, he gets credit because I think that you're right. I think that until Flip came back, this had just become such a mess. And then he sort of straightened things out and certainly got some good draft picks. And I'm not saying he was perfect. He wasn't. But he did give you that sort of sports swagger that this team so sorely lacked.
Yeah. And now Anthony Edwards has the most sports swagger of pretty much any player in the league. And so you've got some of that. So, all right, there's your Feedback Friday here. Enjoy your weekend. The calm before the NBA offseason storm here. We'll keep tabs on anything Wolves related that pops up. We'll probably hit you with a couple mock drafts next week. And then, Wednesday night. It's a Wednesday, Thursday, 2-night draft extravaganza.
Yeah, well, 2 nights, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, that second round. I like that they're doing this. The second round isn't going to be... I think they're doing it in the afternoon, too. It's like afternoon programming on ESPN or something.
They're shortening it up on purpose. That's what they're doing. That's very smart.
Yeah. Well, the first night, it takes forever when it's both rounds. It's like
that's
midnight Central Time. Yeah.
Well, in the second round, they're largely drafting now guys that nobody knows unless you're a diehard.
Yeah. And Bronny James, who might also be a second rounder.
We should
That'd
talk
be
about
fun.
that.
The Wolves blow through that stop sign.
How the hell is Bronny James calling shots here?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Apparently, he's done really well in some of the workouts and some of the he went to the combine, right? But
I know, but don't come off like self-awareness, right? Like if
it's weird that a guy who's probably a second round pick,
right,
is like dictating which teams he says yes and no to working out for.
And he's totally coming off as dad's kid. Like he's gravy training. This is all gravy training. Like make your name. Distance yourself from your dad. And by that, I mean, don't be telling teams I won't work out. They're trying to handle him like he's a top 3 pick.
Yeah. It's like you might be a top 3 pick in the second round.
Really turns me off. Really turns me off. If I was a team, I would say hard pass then. I'm not going to deal with this.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see if Bronny James becomes a Wolf next week.
You got me worked up again.
Some trigger warnings on these episodes here.
All worked up.
This is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.